Hey there, Alex Kidman here with my video review of the Motorola E22i. It is, not shockingly, a cheap Motorola phone. And look, while Motorola's been somewhat busy starting to play in the premium end of the pool again with its Edge phones, here in Australia it's best known for budget phones. And look, honestly, I feel like I've reviewed a lot of them. And that's basically because I have. At $179 outright, the Motorola Moto E22i is one of Motorola's cheaper efforts, however. And it's always tricky getting that balance right with sub $200 phones. You've got to compromise somewhere, and getting that value equation right isn't always going to be the same thing for everyone. And look, as such, my expectations for a $179, that's Australian, your local pricing may vary of course, but my expectations for a $179 phone were not high. And honestly, while it's got its flaws, and they are worth knowing about up front, I think it's a pretty good deal at this price if you're after a low-cost phone. Let's get into what Motorola got right and what it didn't. So, on the design front, the design of cheap phones is typically one of very simple plastic, very bland style, poor build quality, and that's not what Motorola's done here. The E22i has a flattened design that clearly builds on what it does with its Edge phones, giving it a far more premium look than you'd expect in this price range. It ships in Starlight White or Interstellar Black, and leaving the silly naming prefixes aside, either model looks pretty good. Motorola sent me the Interstellar Black to review, as you can see. Controls-wise, there's your usual volume buttons above a combination power and fingerprint reader on the right-hand side. I'm not huge on power fingerprint readers. They work. I kind of wish Motorola went back to the old Batwing logo on the back as the fingerprint reader, but that ship seems to have sailed. You also get USB-C for power at the base and a headphone socket at the top. And look, I don't know why cheap phones have kept the headphone jack where everyone else has dropped it, but I do like the flexibility that having a headphone jack offers. And look, if I want to be super picky on the design, the socket is slightly offset against the top of the frame, which just doesn't look as neat as it could be. Again, though, this is a budget phone. Compromises are all part of the story. In screen terms, it's packing a 6.5-inch 1600 by 720 pixel LCD display. Nothing extraordinary there. However, it's also 90Hz capable, and you really don't see too many fast refresh rate phones in this price range to speak of. 90Hz is nice to have, it's not a vital feature, and by default, Motorola sets it to auto, so it picks when it wants to be 90Hz or 60Hz, but you can force it if you want to. And again, at this price, having smoother scrolling websites and game action certainly isn't a negative. You also get stereo speakers, and Motorola proudly proclaims that they're Dolby Atmos capable. Look, being capable of something and actually outputting it in a reasonable way are two very different matters. The Moto E22i's audio output is fine. It's not really that impressive, and you can't really get that full separation on a phone anyway, if you're the type that has to blast the bus with your music listening choices. If you are, by the way, stop it. On the camera front, if you flip the phone around, you see these two big lenses. And look, when I first saw this, I instinctively shuddered, because I figured one of them would be a fairly pointless 2-megapixel macro, the same as so many other Motorola phones, and budget phones right now generally. But that's not what Motorola did. The rear of the phone has a primary 16-megapixel sensor paired with a 2-megapixel depth sensor for focusing effects only. You'll only ever shoot with that primary sensor. And it's pretty basic. Again, basic phone, cheap. So there's no ultra-wide. You can zoom, but it's limited to 4 times, and it's 4 times digital. So generally speaking, you're probably going to be better off taking that shot and cropping it in a different application. At the front, there's a very ordinary 5-megapixel selfie camera. And look, cheap phones, they just tend to have ordinary cameras. That's absolutely the story of the Moto E22i's output. It's a sign of the times, I guess, that you can still get decent daytime photos out of it. I mean, basically, even cheap phones can have reasonable cameras. They're no longer absolutely awful. But look, if you push this in any way, fast motion or low light or any kind of difficult shot, the cracks are quickly going to show. Under the hood, Motorola keeps it pretty simple with a MediaTek G37 processor, 2GB of RAM, and 32GB of onboard storage. And look, this is exactly how it keeps the E22i so cheap. But it balances those fairly mediocre specs by using Android 12 Go. So if you're new to this and you're thinking, Android 12 Go, what's the Go bit about? The Go version of a given Android release is designed for low power, low cost, low spec phones, and that's exactly what the Moto E22i is. You get Go optimized versions of key Google apps that use less processing power, leading to, in theory, a smoother phone experience. And look, this works mostly. You're not limited just to those Go apps, and you certainly can add any app from Google Play that you'd care to name to the Moto E22i if you must, but its processing is limited. Be ready for lag. Be ready for longer than usual load times. This is a big compromise for this particular phone. It is not fast in any particular way. Multitasking really isn't a thing you should try. Even quick app swapping just doesn't happen that much. This is a basic phone, and it's only going to respond in a basic way. That's absolutely been my experience with it. On the power front, the thin size of the E22i limits what Motorola can do in battery terms, where an awful lot of its range and a lot of its competitors pack in 5,000 mAh batteries these days. The E22i has to make do with just 4,020 mAh of power instead. And that does have an effect on battery life, as does the 90Hz display. So in my tests, I found, yes, it's possible for this thing to last a day on moderate usage. If you push it, it will fall over, though, especially if you keep 90Hz on all the time. It's part of that compromise package that I was talking about. This is not bad, but it's certainly not exceptional. Basically, it's par for the course for a budget phone. So that's the Motorola Moto E22i. Would I recommend it? Yeah, I think I would, as long as you understand its limitations. Its processor is not powerful, and you will need patience with Android Go, especially if you're coming from any kind of more powerful phone. The cameras are limited, and while they shoot acceptably given those limitations, this is far from being a good camera phone. Its battery life is only average, even within this category. Not bad, but certainly not great. However, the flip of that, the balancing side of that, is that the design really is very nice, and it's not just visually nice, it feels solid. This feels like a much more expensive phone than it actually is. The screen is really good for the money as well. Great for those late night YouTube binges, or if you must, your social media doom scrolling. And look, not to belabor the point, it only costs $179 outright. Anyway, that's my take on the Motorola Moto E22i. Got any questions? Hit me up below, and thanks for watching.